Yeah, I like to consider myself a professional masturbator. I believe the term addict is kinda harsh considering porn and masturbation don't exactly harm you in any way. What genres do I like? Well, I guess the question should be what genres don't I like? Hahaha, kind of hard to decide, you know what I'm saying?
Today we're discussing porn addiction. I've bashed porn addicts and coomers quite frequently on this channel, and I believe a video explaining exactly why I do such is definitely long overdue. Now, for the sake of simplicity, I've split this video into 3 sections. The first being an explanation of the science behind addiction, the second being the negative side effects of pornography, and the third being the normalization of said actions in modern day society. But with that breakdown aside, allow me to ask you a simple question. What is addiction?
Like I said, I wouldn't call it an addiction. It's just a hobby, like gaming or watching television. I can basically quit whenever I want.
Before we can discuss the negative effects of porn addiction, we must first discuss how addictions are even formed. Let's start simple. What is dopamine? Dopamine is a neurotransmitter responsible for your quote-unquote feel-good feelings, if you want to call it that. It's what allows you to feel accomplished after doing something which is biologically beneficial to you. During the primal age, it was used for finding food to stay healthy, escaping a predator, or having sex for the sake of procreation. And because the only thing we could rely on were our instincts, our brain created a system which rewards us for achieving these tasks to maintain our survival. This release of dopamine also establishes a form of memory that lets us know performing said actions are good for us. Therefore, when faced with the same scenario again, we learn that such actions are beneficial as we are rewarded with the feel-good feelings for performing them. That is the dummy's guide to how the reward system works in our brain. Now, with the use of nicotine, narcotics, and alcohol, we can actually bypass this whole system by creating a false sense of accomplishment. These substances cause a huge release of dopamine, which can range anywhere from 5 to 10 times the amount of dopamine you should receive on even your best days. For reference, on a normal day, the average person releases about 50 nanograms per deciliter of dopamine, or about 1.7 nanomoles per deciliter if you're a loser chemist. 100 nanograms per deciliter being the max a person should receive on a really good day. Looking at other substances, tobacco releases about 500 and pot roughly 700. Now, frequent use of such products has a severely negative effect on the brain as it creates an unnatural reward system by accomplishing nothing. The brain responds to this influx of dopamine by suppressing the neurons which can receive said dopamine signals, as well as limiting the amount of dopamine released after each intake. This is what creates the commonly known phenomenon also known as tolerance. This tolerance to a substance also causes you to intake higher volumes of said substance, thus creating an even higher tolerance to the point where your dopamine levels are so low that you need to digest said substance to even fucking function. Neuroplasticity is a concept in which the brain is capable of rearranging its neural network for the sake of adapting to a new condition. Using this concept of neuroplasticity, your brain can adapt to prioritize searching for said substance to reignite your dopamine again. This is what turns the use of substances into a necessity, and because of this newfound necessity, the symptoms of withdrawal can be insanely severe. These include a lack of motivation, anxiety, insomnia, and many others. Since your dopamine is now below the average level, your brain is in a primal mode doing everything to reignite that spark again. Hence why we call it an addiction. Alright, that was a mag dump of information. Now let's discuss porn addiction. Porn addiction functions in a similar way. Viewing excessive pornography leads to greater tolerance, which leads to viewing more and more depraved material to get the same kick. But you already pieced that together. In order to maintain a normal level of dopamine, these coomers have to be constantly looking at porn through their feeds, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Now that we've laid the foundation for addiction, and more specifically porn addiction, let's link this to how porn can be such a self-destructive medium. And in my opinion, here's what makes porn significantly worse than any narcotic you can buy from your plug.
Yes, I am an atheist. The whole stigma around masturbation and pornography is simply just religious propaganda. I'd much rather look at the science, which states that masturbation is nothing but a bodily function rather than fairy tales about a man walking on water, am I right?
How does one differentiate fantasy from reality? One thing porn does best is destroy one's perception of what is considered normal. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's look at some real-life examples. Simps and incels. Simps and incels are two sides of the same coin. Despite one hating women and the other bending over for women, the two are actually born from the same origins. Those being a severe lack of female attention and excessive viewing of pornographic material. Porn sets an unrealistic tone for how humans actually interact. And to most people, porn acting acting is a fucking joke. When people say, wow, this is porn levels of acting, it implies that the acting fucking sucks. So that begs the question of how can anyone actually believe any of this shit? Well, let's take a little theory of neuroplasticity. With excessive viewing of more and more porn, your brain is essentially rewiring itself to accept such blatant acting as the norm. It's the same with the scenarios. A common trope in porn is the classic,
I'm stuck.
These make-believe scenarios become patterns that are now ingrained into your brain, and you're now hardwired into believing that a menial task such as opening a door would actually get you laid. This is where the incel trope actually comes from. Oh, why the fuck didn't this bitch get on her knees and suck me off on the spot after I opened the door for her? All women are fucking cunts. Porn warped your sense of reality, and now your retarded ass can't tell the difference between fantasy and reality. And that's because what your brain expected is not normal human behavior. You know, unless you're at a bar or a club, then maybe the whores there will give you a blowy for a beer or a toke, but it sure as fuck doesn't work if you're a fat, ugly piece of shit. The incels hate women not just because they won't date them, but because these women don't fit their delusional view of them that porn has created. In porn, the tub of lard gets laid by opening a door for the lady, and with constant repetitions of that, your brain perceives that as the way to get some. Now let's look at the simps. Simps are the exact same as the incels. The only difference is they still have hope. Rather than getting pissed that the women aren't fucking them, they believe bending to their will eventually get them laid. Their brains are hardwired into believing that donations and paying rent are normal human behaviors and will eventually get them the girl. But if you think that's not enough to scare you from porn, let's look at the depraved extremes. By now, we should understand that porn alters your perception of reality, and much like a drug, eventually the vanilla shit won't be enough to give your dopamine levels a kick. Well, the porn industry thought about that and created a huge variety of depraved material so you can keep that dwindling dopamine flowing. It's why shit like traps, shemales, and feet are even a fucking thing. And continuing with our little idea of neuroplasticity, if such depraved materials are viewed for an extended period of time, then they too will be considered normal in the eyes of these coomers. Now allow me to scare you a bit more. A question for the straight men in the audience, which is probably everybody.
Would you date a trans person, honestly?
Now I'll be brutally honest with you guys, unless you're a fucking bottom feeder in the dating game, who the fucking nobody, that's who. Although there is an exception, and you've probably already guessed it. Porn addicts. People whose brains have been molded into believing chicks with dicks are fucking normal. And yes, I know it's not just porn, there are more societal issues with this normalization, but porn is definitely a factor at play. Same goes with obesitrons and fucking twinks. It's not gay because they have a feminine penis, ooh-woo. No dude, that is a man. He has a penis and XY chromosomes and it's fucking gay. What about those poly relationships? You ever wonder why every poly relationship looks like this without fail? Well, it's because these fat bitches want to feel empowered and the fucking guys are a bunch of cucks. I can't imagine having to wait in line behind 3 other guys to fuck your wife. Like, how fucking pathetic is that? As I said before, this is partly a societal issue with the normalization of said degenerate behavior, but pornography definitely helps push it. But you know what's even worse than regular old porn? Hentai. Fucking hentai. All I'm saying is if a third Hiroshima would have prevented hentai, I think it would have been worth it. Now what makes hentai worse than regular porn? Its depiction of fantasy. You see, with the power of animation and the severe lack of restrictions in Japan, almost any fantasy can be realized through hentai. And because they're fucking cartoons, it can create such a huge disconnect to the point where you aren't even attracted to real women. Allow me to explain. These cartoons are meant to be idealized women for these fucking losers, meaning they have little to no physical flaws because they're meant to be ideal. That is a luxury real women don't have. Even supermodels will have their imperfections, as it's only human. Now let's take a little theory of neuroplasticity again. Your brain is being rewired to look at these idealized cartoon women, which means the smallest imperfection on a real woman would be a turnoff, as your brain now only seeks out these perfect cartoon women. But that's not even the worst of it. My biggest issue with hentai is its sexualization of children. Let's look at the lolicon aspect of it. What's wrong, Serial? It's only a cartoon. No real children were harmed. Huh, interesting. Now, the question should be, why the fuck are you watching hentai depicting children in the first place? Hentai is fantasy meant to simulate reality, and using our little theory from part 1, you must realize the issue with that, don't ya? You fucking pedos? Well, come on, lowly hentai allows closeted pedos to maintain their urges, so it's actually a good thing. What I hate about this argument is that eventually your tolerance will grow to the point where you'll seek out actual CP or engage in some real-life activities. Like, Jesus Christ. If you're one of these fuckers who watches lowly hentai, please do the world a favor and fucking hang yourself. Although knowing how fucked your brain is, you might enjoy that, and I doubt even industrial rope could support your fat ass body. Another thing I fucking hate hearing is, what, you don't like looking at tits 24/7? What are you, a fag? No, it's not because we don't like looking at tits. Breasts are a sexual organ and men are naturally attracted to them. However, unlike you, most people aren't so deprived of dopamine that they need to constantly be looking at porn to fucking function. It's you that has so little self-control that you can't keep your addiction under control, and thus you have to display your shitty material to everyone. And this brings us to my next biggest issue with pornography. Its normalization in modern day society.
I think it's actually great that pornography and jacking off are so normalized in modern day society. It allows me to feel pleasure without having to be ashamed of myself. And with that acceptance, there's more room for growth in the porn industry. It's really a win-win situation.
I've received a decent amount of comments praising my efforts to reform these simps and porn addicts, and I'm more than willing to accept free compliments, but it should be noted that rehabilitation was never one of my objectives, although it is a welcomed byproduct. No, rather, my main objective when it comes to looking down on such ideologies is to reject them as normal. And that's one of my biggest issues with modern porn addiction, the normalization of it. Porn and masturbation are acts which should not be considered normal. Whether you engage or not is none of my concern, but you should at least acknowledge the shitty rabbit hole you're entering when you do. The problem with modern day society is its insistence on normalization of degenerate acts, which include the act of self-pleasure. When people believe that what they're doing is just something all people do, the guilt goes away and it allows you to indulge yourself in whatever disgusting material you want. My bigger problem with this is when it comes to children finding said material and starting this degenerate trend early on in life. And kids are naturally curious. Hormones will do that, but the viewing of pornographic material and engaging in such a medium gives a developing mind a false impression of sex and relationships. Part of why I despise a medium like hentai is because a cartoon is the easiest gateway for unsuspecting kids. When Pornhub jacking off and hentai are just memes or things people do, it creates a false view of the world while also adding all the negative effects from the past two sections to an even greater degree due to kids still having a developing and impressionable brain. I mentioned earlier that the Japanese porn industry is all sorts of fucked and that the industry is actually partly responsible for their rapidly declining birth rate, and it doesn't even have anything to do with their low testosterone men. Now, when you're living in the biggest Asian porn supplier in a country completely overrun with suggestive consumerism, yeah, no shit, viewing excessive amounts of hypersexualized content warps your perception of dating. Maybe there's a reason why shit like rape and NTR are so popular there, and NTR is just an abbreviation for netorare, which is basically just cuck porn. You know, I realize Japan has a lot of cuck type shit there, especially some of their mainstream anime. Fucking Renter retard over here. If you stop making this gay shit and created an actual good Berserk adaptation for once, maybe the male masculinity would rise and your birth rate wouldn't be so fucked, Mr. Fumio Kishida, but I digress. My main point being, the environment of which you live greatly affects your perception of what is normal. The more you plaster with suggestive material, the faster you'll fall into said rabbit hole. But let's take a more relevant example. Modern dating. If we use our little concept of neuroplasticity, we know that porn warps the brain. Obviously. I've been saying it this whole fucking video. It becomes even worse in dating. Now, excessive pornography and multiple sexual partners have a lot in common with each other. The more partners you have, the more your brain will seek out different sexual experiences, and the less fulfilled you'll be with just one partner. Fun fact, if you combine this with the concept of our little theory of sexual selection from another video, it's actually the reason why women cheat more than men. It's accessibility to multiple men through their sexual selection advantage, as well as the brain being rewired to enjoy multiple facets of dick. Since they're so used to many different people, they'll naturally get bored of a single man, hence the phrase, you can't make a housewife out of a hoe. That's also partly why cheating is so normalized in modern day society, because surprise surprise, being a whore is also widely normalized. But what about porn and masturbation? Well, porn functions in a similar way. The more depraved the porn you're watching as you enter a relationship, the less fulfilled you'll be during regular intercourse, as your significant other won't be the same as your porn star girls and obviously won't live up to your every perverted desire. Not as harmful as having multiple partners due to the lack of intimacy, but can be still quite destructive if viewed in excess. And all this is stuff we just apparently do now. It's nothing but impulsive instant gratification, which modern day society is ingrained in your brain as being normal behavior while disregarding all negative aspects of it. But perhaps that's what they want. Acceptance of depraved materials allows said depraved materials to be carried out without question. All that, and it's not even discussing the scummy inner workings of the porn industry. It's a scary time we live in, isn't it? Hopefully that'll suffice for my 3-week absence. Anyways, if you enjoyed it, haven't subscribed, I'm gonna give the Clinton Foundation a call and have you fucking suicided.